Good evening, and welcome to Citizens Are Not Slaves with David McFarlane. I had to drop off of Twitter today. I was just so incensed. I was outraged. I was at the end of my rope as far as intersectionalists and postmodernists goes. I had one guy the other day, I argued for objective truth, and he called me a liar because of it. Like, I can understand not believing in objective truth, but how do you call somebody a liar for arguing, or dishonest was actually the word he used, but how do you call somebody dishonest for arguing for an objective standard for truth? I don't get it. I don't know. So that I haven't figured out. But earlier today, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez went down to the border and she toured a couple of facilities. We all know what happened at this point. She seemingly went crazy. She had some kind of a psychological episode, and I think I've kind of figured out what exactly was going on there. Now, I know that some people think, she was just, she saw terrible things at the border. Other people think that she was just lying about everything. I feel like there's an alternative explanation that's more deeply rooted in psychology. And the first thing I want to say is I've kind of felt for a while like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez has a victim complex or a martyr complex. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense, seeing as how she's one of the youngest congresspeople ever, and she seemingly has gotten to a point where success should be the characterizing the characteristic that defines her life. If I was in Congress at her age, as a matter of fact, if I was in Congress at my age, I would feel like I had achieved something, and that I had been successful, and then I would get to work trying to make the country a better place. Now, I mean, to be fair, I think she thinks she's trying to make the country a better place. I don't agree with her, but that's politics, right? That's not the psychology that we're going to talk about today. But anyway, I had to get off of Twitter because I just couldn't take it anymore, and this was really one of the things that did it. And as I got off and I started thinking about, they got off of all social media, as a matter of fact, and I started thinking about what was going on, I started realizing that it's a sympathetic victim complex. That it's basically a victim complex, but it's based on sympathy, which is really interesting because it actually seems like that explains how many liberals, well-off, rich, many white liberals have these victim complexes. And the question is, how do you have a victim complex when everything in your life is pretty decent? I mean, don't get me wrong, we can talk about neuroticism, because neuroticism is one of the big 5 personality traits, right? And that is how susceptible you are to negative emotions. And I got to tell you that no matter how big you get, how much success you have, you are still susceptible for some reason or another to these negative emotions, right? I mean, President Trump definitely displays the idea or the fact that when people say things about him personally, even though it's, clearly not true, it somehow pricks him, right? So he's the president of the United States, and he still is susceptible when people say things about him. I'm gonna use another example, Taylor Swift, right? She is the premier recording artist in the country. There is no one bigger, more famous, more loved, more talented, more successful right now than Taylor Swift. And just the other day, I saw an article talking about how she was upset about somebody in particular obtaining much of her portfolio. She didn't like that person, and that person now has about 6 of her old records. And, you could say those are your old records, right? You're doing new stuff that's better and hopefully better, and let the old stuff go. But that's not how humanity works. That's not how people work, right? I mean, that's gonna bother her, and that's gonna bother. I mean, it would bother really anybody. If somebody who you don't like got a hold of a major portion of your life's work, so it's understandable. And all of this is absolutely how human nature works. So we're all somewhat neurotic, and of course the question is how neurotic, right? So that's what the testing in the Big Five personality theory tries to handle. They try to test you to see how neurotic you are, how susceptible to these negative emotions you are. And I think that we can clearly say that Alexandria Ocasio Cortez has a somewhat high level of this particular trait, right? So she is very susceptible to these negative emotions. Now, the other thing that I've come to realize is that I am going to get demonetized on this channel. In fact, I'm not even monetized yet. I'm just never going to get monetized. If I tell the truth, I'm never going to get monetized. So what I've come to realize is that women, and this is something that I've learned through kind of the art of pickup, right? You want to make a woman feel strong emotions. You want to be able to push her hot and then cold and hot and cold. They like that. For some reason, if I would rather be even-keeled and not experiencing strong emotions, and if I'm going to experience something, I want it to be good, and I'd rather it be marginally good than really, really bad. Women don't seem to share that trait. They seem to want to feel, very passionately. They want to feel strong levels of emotion. So Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, I would say, is somewhat addicted to strong levels of emotion, which she has figured out. I don't know if she's figured it out logically, but she's figured it out practically, that she can get basically a shot of adrenaline and emotion by jumping into this sympathetic victim complex mode, right? So she's not the victim, but she's defending the victim. Now, a lot of people would think that this is just classic virtue signaling. I don't think that it's classic virtue signaling, though it may play into virtue signaling. I don't think she's doing this for other people to see how wonderful she is. I think she just enjoys the drama, and by jumping into these situations, she can kind of have this. Now, I think that she's developed a little bit further, right? So she's got this sympathetic victim complex, and then she also kind of tries to imagine herself in the role of the victim, right? So she identifies very strongly with the women that she saw today. They were Hispanic, they were women, they were, between the ages of younger than her and older than her, so that statement didn't make any sense. But I mean, they were around her age, right? So she could easily identify with them. Now, one of the reports that I saw was that somebody had, one of the eyewitnesses to the events that had occurred said that she had mumbled under her breath that she thought something like one of these guys was going to assault her in a sexual manner, right? So, and this is when two people told an unrelated joke and started laughing about it, and she kind of took it to mean that they were laughing about this thing that she had said. She didn't really say to anybody else what it was that she'd said under her breath, so she didn't explain this. And this is the incident that she talked about in her tweet, where she had talked to a supervisor, and the supervisor said they were just blowing off steam, which seems to be the case. They were just making a joke. That particular joke, we don't know what it was yet, probably was somewhat harmless, and yet it's been blown out of proportion because it happened to coincide with this, kind of fantasy that AOC had, that she was like these women and that she might be attacked or abused in a particular way because of her the traits that she shares with the women that shared that cell, right? and again, there was a situation where there was a woman who apparently drank out of one of the toilets, and now these are toilets, by the way, with a toilet, and then on the top of that they have like a water fountain kind of thing, and so she didn't understand how to use this, and she ended up drinking out of the bowl. Terrible, but apparently not necessarily anybody's fault. I mean, that person can't be that smart, right? Because obviously when I saw these toilet/sinks, which are like all-in-one units, it was very clear immediately how you're supposed to use that. And I don't think anybody with really much intelligence would have drank out of the toilet part of that. I mean, it's pretty clear there's a dirty water part and a clean water part, and you get your water from the clean water. Anyway, point is, so she's got this sympathetic martyr complex, right? And then she now is actually going, and she spends a lot of time fantasizing about herself in the role of these women on the border. This is one of the things that you can kind of see in her tweets and in her public statements. She is very forceful about the border situation. Everybody in ICE is terrible. The women who are coming across the border are innocent, pure as the driven snow. Now, that usually signals or identifies to you that that person is identifying with those people, right? So usually people think of themselves as pure and innocent, and when they identify with a group, they start to ascribe to the group the purity and innocence that they believe they themselves have, right? So this is what's the term I'd look for on this? It's almost like imputed righteousness. Basically, she's imputing righteousness to people who are like herself because she thinks she herself is righteous, right? So anyway, you have a combination of these two things, and now what happened when she went to the border is that she's had these imaginations, like these fantasies in her mind about what she is and how she would be treated, and then actually being there reinforced those fantasies in her mind. Now, I'm calling this the reinforced traumatic fantasy disorder, right? I just made that up. This is not in the MERS or anything like that. It's very similar, I think, to PTSD. But I don't think people understood what she was going through at the moment. And when I say going through, I mean she was putting herself through it by not being grounded to reality. But she was going through kind of a thing where she was almost experiencing the trauma of getting caught trying to enter the United States. I don't think there's any rational way to talk to her at that point, right? When she's in that state. And the way that she is described as being, as going after people, it seems like it has to be because of a irrational, neurotic mental state, right? And I think that this kind of explains it. This idea of she's got a fantasy, she's been imagining herself in this, and then all of a sudden she's in a situation where it's almost like she's able to touch the person that she has this sympathetic martyr syndrome with. She's able to see the cell. She actually went inside the cell with them and got to experience what it was like to really be one of them. And in doing so, I think she lost objectivity, right? She can't see the world for what it is because she's seeing the world through the lens of a fantasy that she has created, where she is also a victim with these women. Now, I think this is something that it's pretty self-evident that this wasn't normal, right? So we all kind of saw this happening, and my first reaction was, you're just telling lies. You're just lying. And yeah, I mean, it's not true. But what we have to understand, I think, is that she's telling these lies to herself first, and she's getting herself really worked up emotionally. And then she's telling the rest of the world something that doesn't make any real sense if you analyze it logically. And I've always said this. If you're an intersectionalist, if you're a postmodernist, the best kind of oppression is oppression that you never actually have to face, right? So you want to get credit for being oppressed. You want to act like you're oppressed, but you don't want to actually be oppressed, because that would actually be bad, right? So I think the sympathetic martyr complex and this concept of a reinforced traumatic fantasy disorder are really, they're kind of spot on. And I think if you look at the sympathetic martyr complex, I think that it is every bit as ubiquitous right now as the TDS that we talk about, Trump derangement syndrome, which is a kind of a kind of cognitive dissonance where basically you're saying, hey, if I know the world, Trump is never going to be president. And then when Trump gets elected president, it really caused actual pain. It caused people pain and discomfort to realize now that a man that they had vilified is the president of the United States. And they can't walk back that vilification. They can't say, okay, well, he's probably not really a Nazi. So they have to, suffer through letting this person be president. Or, go the impeachment route, which is what a lot of them have tried to do. So I think this hopefully this helps. Hopefully you've, I don't know if I explained it well enough, but hopefully I've kind of imparted some of my understanding of the psychological disorder that is being a Democrat in Congress these days. And by the way, it's not all of them. There's a very specific group, Talib Rashid, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, and a few others. Jenny Chow, I think, from Representative Jenny something. I think she's from Hawaii. Anyway, point is, there's hopefully this helped you understand the psychology that's going on here. It helped me when I understood the psychology. I didn't think that what she said was any truer than it was when I thought, I was really just very upset with her for the lies. But it helped me calm down. It helped me say, okay, there's a reason for this. There's a psychology going on here that she probably is not able to control at this point. I mean, quite frankly, when we get into a lot of irrational states, and when I get into a irrational state, when you get into a irrational state, chances are you can't control that irrational state, and you can't usually even see it, right? It is hard to see that irrational state, and a lot of times, you're going to project. You're going to say, no, I'm not in an irrational state. You're in an irrational state. It's really hard to figure out sometimes which one of you is in the irrational state. That guy that was talking about on Twitter that accused me of being dishonest because I argued for an objective standard for truth, he then went on to say a lot of things that I felt like were really projections, right? So he's pointing at me and saying you're dishonest and you're just trying to put people down, and it's very ironic that you. I'm not sure I can represent that accurately, so I just won't. But he said that I was being ironic, and I felt like actually he was being ironic, So clearly in that situation, neither of us were going to come to view the other person's side on that, right? So it's kind of that's the mode that we get into when we argue with people. And I gotta say, I'm not necessarily sure how to walk that back other than time, right? So when I get in that situation with people, what I usually try to do is disengage, pull away, and calm down. Now, calming down usually allows my rational brain to kick in, and then I'll start to see, maybe I made some mistakes. I did I do recognize my mistakes, right? When I recently I was in a conversation with a young lady, and I made some mistakes in that conversation, pulled back, looked at it, realized, like, okay, that was just really dumb, and was able to, recognize my own mistakes. A lot of the times, I think that, like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, I hope that she'll be able to pull back. Like, she'll be able to sleep on it and then wake up tomorrow morning and look back at this and go, yeah, that was actually rather irrational. These guys were probably not laughing at the comment I made on my breath. They probably were laughing at some joke that they made that was completely unrelated. The woman who drank from the toilet part, when the clean water was right there, that's clearly not anybody's fault but her own. It's and all of the things that happened seem like they could be viewed in a light that is not crazy detrimental. It's not this emergency light of we have to make major changes. Now, don't get me wrong, politics seems to love the emergency, irrational, like that method of acting, that method of behaving that Alexandria Ocasio Cortez exhibited today is politically somewhat effective. But it's not, I mean, if you want to achieve your goal, then yes, it's effective. If you want to achieve a good goal, then it's not effective. So I guess there's two ways of really looking at that. All right, I tried to end this video a second ago, but I'm going to actually end it now. I hope that this has helped you understand things. I hope that the actions and the activities of the day make a little bit more sense to you, even if I don't get this up for a day or two, or maybe don't see it for a couple of days. But I hope that this explanation makes things make more sense to you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I think. I'd like to keep this conversation going, so go ahead and put your comments down below, and then like, subscribe, and share the video, please. Your support is appreciated, and follow me at xverum on Twitter. You guys have a great day, and see you next time.